Well, welcome to the Unstoppable Freedom Podcast. I'm Jimmy Page. Today, we're going to talk about freedom from a little different angle, specifically through the lens of small business and how small businesses may just be the key to restoring our culture and maintaining the American spirit and the American dream. And our guest today is an expert in business. He recognizes the importance of business as part of our culture and part of our freedom. His 40-plus year career started with building a trade firm on the floor of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange in partnership with his brother Curtis. Now, for me, that sounds like impossible. Like, how do you even do that? But he did it. And then he was recruited to New York City for senior positions, working at some of the world's premier financial institutions, including Credit Suisse, SAC Capital Management, and others. And he came to witness, experience, and understand how business really works in the United States. Recognize the importance of small business to our society's health. Chris advocates for the benefits and value of small businesses over the abuses of global institutions. Man, I am super excited to have you as a guest. Chris, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here, Jimmy.
Okay, well, let's get right into it. I want to go into how small businesses were really decimated by lockdowns. They were really hurt by the closings and by our public health policy, which ended up creating tremendous economic fallout. And then how the big box retailers stayed open. Why was that policy and the execution of that so damaging to our communities?
Oh, gosh, it was heartbreaking, wasn't it?
It really was.
So I was retired at this point in time, Jimmy. I had left New York. My children had graduated from high school and were on their way to becoming young, healthy adults, happy adults. And I had retired to my favorite state, Colorado.
Come on, let's go. That's my home state. Let's go.
It's so beautiful there. I've been to 49 of the 50 states, and Colorado is my favorite.
Wow.
I'd retired to Breckenridge, and when the lockdown started to happen, and I saw that people were being identified as essentially non-essential. What a classic bureaucratic phrase.
Mm-hmm.
How can you identify any human or organization or family as non-essential? Because coming from a family that grew up with a small business, I knew that as these policies were being implemented, that families were going to be hurt, that dreams and hard work and sweat equity and whole family investments were going to be wiped out.
Yeah.
I think all of us, particularly at the beginning, were all in on we're all going to sacrifice. We don't know what's going on here. We all need to be able to chip in and do our part for the betterment of the whole country.
Yeah.
But it didn't pan out that way.
Yeah.
Policies were made.
Well, and I was thinking that part of the thing that made this most troubling for most of us to swallow was the fact that small businesses were shuttered. They were closed. In fact,
Yes,
hundreds of thousands will never reopen. We've ruined generational businesses, which actually makes me mad. And at the same time, we sent all of our money and resources to these big box retailers that have ownership groups that are all around the world. They have no care or design for the local community or the local business people. I mean, why was it okay to keep big box stores open and not to have the small retailers open? It made absolutely no sense. And I think that's what most Americans feel was most egregious in the shutdowns.
Small business has lost their seat at the table. There used to be a phrase that all of us are familiar with. Small business is the backbone of our country. When was the last time you heard that phrase? Well, part of what brought me out of retirement and becoming an advocate for the importance and values of small business is the recognition that small businesses still are the backbone of this country. If you look at the number of registered businesses in this country, 99% of businesses that are registered as tax-paying entities in this country are small businesses.
Wow.
So when large box stores were able to stay open, and there was a need for food, there was a need for essentials,
Yeah.
but the fact that COVID COVID seemed to exist in certain stores, but didn't seem to exist in other stores. I think just the overall, a lot of people in this country saw that as blatantly unfair.
Yes.
And that's kind of where the beginning of the mistrust came in regards to, do people at the top really understand what's going on here?
Yeah.
Do they understand what their policies are all about? And
Yes.
why isn't there any conversation or discussion around, is this right? Or can we do it a better way?
Yeah.
It seemed to be, we have a solution. This is the solution.
Mhm.
This is the right solution.
Yeah.
And the rest of you just move along, and we'll take care of the rest.
Yeah. Well, and from my seat, from the freedom side of the aisle, and with a real value for individual liberty, with a real value for the work ethic of America, I look at that as a move to government control of our resources, government distribution of our resources. This whole idea of collectivism, of basically, essentially removing private ownership of goods and services, and now consolidating it under these big boxes of Walmart, Target, Amazon, blah blah blah. Insert the company, and meanwhile, my buddies who own the hardware shop down the street, they're going out of business. The health clubs are told they can't open, but we can have the strip clubs open. It became absolute nonsense. There was no rationality for the policy. And in the end, small businesses were the ones that took the heat for this.
Well, when you say there's no rationality, it depends from which perspective you look at it. If you look at it from the perspective of the general person on the street, the common person is going to say, who's coming up with these policies? And that's actually when you start to follow the money. It's the same old refrain. Okay, how are decisions made in politics and in business? So I know it's comfortable to view it as a grand design. I'm more fundamental than that. I say people just do things that are either easier or more profitable. And when it comes to decision-making policies in state houses in Washington, it's easier to control two major drugstore chains than all the different drugstore companies that are out there.
Yeah.
It's easier to have big box distribution because you're talking to a CEO instead of thousands of individual owners.
Yep.
And it's more profitable because, oh boy. Okay, I'm going to stop being politically correct. And
good, because we're not
and monitoring myself in regard to this, because politicians are after the money. Okay. And the people that donate to them, the lobbyists, are hired by large organizations that have the funds, the resources, the ability to collaborate to make policy. And that's why policies were made that way. It's unfortunate that in a health crisis of all things, that politics becomes a consideration instead of science. I was just reading an article about the Barrington Health document that was censored.
Yeah.
And was recently proven in Biden versus Missouri in the district court review of it to be have been censored and controlled, that the science associated with what Barrington was saying was accurate, that the best approach to the virus was essentially to have protection to those that are most vulnerable, and then allow the rest of us to be able to function in our society in a manner that's respectful of each other. Again, if you want to wear a mask, you can wear a mask.
Sure.
If I want to wear a mask, or I feel that I have comorbidities. I have diabetes, or I have a lung issue. I'll take extra protection.
Yep.
But one size fits all in a nation of 360 million people is a simple solution, that hopefully we've learned from. And my biggest concern is that when people make decisions, whether they're right or wrong, they live and die in these positions. I think it's very unfortunate, particularly in our political arena, that people can't say, I made a mistake. Or even, here's a crazy one, I've done some additional research and I've changed my mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We should applaud politicians instead of calling them flip-floppers. We should applaud a politician that says, you know what? After careful consideration, I've changed my mind.
Yeah. Well, and I have a little different perspective on this too. It's in concert with what you're saying, but I believe that most politicians are compromised. They're compromised from the very thing that you started with by when you said follow the money. So there is no question that the vast majority of politicians are compromised, and they will do what's expedient for their control, their power, and their wealth. And they're making decisions like that because very early on in the COVID challenge that we face, which that's a whole nother topic that we won't touch on too much. But very early on, we knew exactly what COVID was. We know who was at risk, and we know who wasn't. And we should have treated this like we did any other public health emergency. But just like you said, you quarantine the people that are at risk, you take precautions, you give people the tools that they need to do it. You give them early treatments, which, by the way, there were tons of early treatments. All of those doctors in the Barrington Declaration were censored, deplatformed, and silenced entirely, which some would say in America, is that even possible? Well, yeah, it's possible. It's absolutely possible because we're in the midst of a global takeover of leadership. And that's part of the problem. And then we have these small business owners. And let's get back to that because this is really, really important. There were a handful, and by a handful, I mean a few hundred small businesses that saw this quote unquote manufactured crisis for what it was and decided they were going to keep their businesses open because their livelihood depended on it, the survival of their family depended on it, the survival of many people that they employed depended on it. And they evaluated the risk and said, make your own decisions based upon your personal health situation, but we're going to keep our business open. New Jersey gym owners, a handful of churches. There were a bunch of small businesses that decided we're going to continue to operate and potentially face legal problems. But thank God they did.
Which they did.
Yeah.
So, and I caution this approach. I recognize and applaud civil disobedience when required. Major changes in this country have come because of people taking proper and moral stands on topics that were important.
Yes.
With that said, the power of the state is heavy. It is a heavy burden and a big stick. And people that fight the state has unlimited resources when it comes to fighting their citizenry.
Yes.
It becomes sometimes a devastating impact on their lives. The doctors in the Barrington Declaration, actually, I was just reading an editorial that one of the doctors wrote this week, and he paid a heavy price and almost lost his license. Families, those gyms in New Jersey, they went to jail. Okay. Oh boy.
Yeah, but without them, I mean, my physicians, my primary doc and others have received letters that said they were going to lose their license.
They were going to lose their license
because they were treating people. Yeah, they were treating people that were with quote unquote unapproved treatments, which, by the way, what I love about the Supreme Court is they just ruled that the FDA, or actually a federal court ruled that the FDA does not have authority to tell physicians how to practice medicine. Thank God we're restoring sanity there. And then we represented hundreds of nurses here in the state of Colorado that were fired or lost their jobs because they refused to take an experimental medical treatment. They refused to take and they were fired. Well, now we know that experimental medical treatment has tremendous adverse reactions by the millions, including up to death. And now we're seeing it, of course, in young men who are dropping dead because of this forced medical treatment. And now what you're seeing, and you know this too, is on the world stage, our political leaders are all saying, oh, no, we didn't force anybody to do it. And we all know that's nonsense because there are class action lawsuits representing Navy SEALs, representing nurses, representing people in every single small business area who are saying, no, you did force us. And now we've got
to force us.
Yeah.
And someone needs to be accept responsibility.
Yes.
At a minimum.
Yeah.
At a minimum. I know the legal potential liability associated with saying we were wrong, but can we at least say we're going to do it differently the next time? We're going to allow not one choice or the other.
Yes.
We're going to allow people, treat them as adults.
Yes.
Treat them as informed adults to be able to make their own decisions.
Yes.
You know, the whole argument of, well, you're going to kill my grandmother if you don't wear a mask. My response was, it's not my job to take care of your grandmother. Nothing personal. I think she's probably an adorable woman, but tell her to stay home and be protected.
Yes. Yes. And I think that individual liberty with respect to medical decisions, for example, I think where there's risk.
So important.
Yeah. I mean, you know, you can't, and our government has historically done this. It has
historically done this.
Yes. And to the detriment of very specific populations, including the Black community. I mean, if I was a member of the Black community, I would be extremely skeptical of any mandates or force that come through our government public health officials. We have a history of this now. And so we should be skeptical. And I think that's why when you're hearing physicians that are saying this, that would have benefited small business owners, people like us in the community, because if we had just taken a sane approach to this, all of these businesses and all of these schools could have remained open, and we could have avoided all of the economic destruction that we found as a result.
Should have remained open. Schools in particular, young children, it's been shown time and time again, study after study after study, that young children are the least affected by COVID, the least likely to have had any significant side effects from COVID. But they are most certainly the most affected from being out of school for 2 years. They have been generationally damaged.
Yes.
So how can small businesses help with this?
Well, let me ask you that, right? Because this is important. This is the bullseye of your experience. And that's why you're so important to this show and to our listeners, because the effect of closing these businesses has had a devastating effect on our local communities, right?
Yes.
But now there is this resurgence of small business. And the question then becomes, how do small businesses recover? And then how do we prevent this from happening again? Why are they the key to really maintaining our culture and our freedoms?
The ability to be able to understand each other, the ability to be able to hear each other is innately human. And when you are dealing with only online or large organizations that don't have a vested interest in knowing you, your community, or their employees, they're going to miss really what I consider to be the secret sauce of capitalism. And the secret sauce of capitalism is the people. You know, politicians and big business CEOs and various officials would have you believe that capitalism is really just buying and selling stuff. That's all business is all about, is buying and selling stuff. And I'll argue that really the key to business is the human component of it. It's the people buying and selling from each other.
Yeah.
That's the secret sauce of business. So if you're a small business owner, the way that you compete and differentiate yourself from those large organizations that are unfeeling, that are uncaring, that are truly in it simply to maximize shareholder value And by the way, what that means is all the profits that they take out of your neighborhood go somewhere else instead of into your playground, instead of into your school
Yes.
system, instead of
Yes.
into all of the other aspects associated with maintaining your neighborhood, your community. That's the key to being able to win as a small business. Is your locality is your superpower. It's not that you have a disadvantage. You have a superpower that they can't compete against. And that is your ability to have face-to-face interaction with other people.
Yes. And you mentioned earlier, and I don't know, we might have missed it, but you said if I talk to one more online chat bot or whatever it is, and I got to tell you, it's so true. This week, I had 3 experiences with those online chat bots that are supposed to help you resolve issues. And they are so frustrating. And I keep saying, talk to someone, representative.
No, they're
get
like,
me to a person. And
I'd be happy to get you to a person.
Anymore.
But let me ask you one more question first. You know,
to help me route your call to the right person. I'm like,
I know it's true, so I'm just going to say it. Many customer service processes are designed to frustrate you to stop from pursuing them. Okay, so it's a cost reduction strategy.
Jeez.
It's not about customer service. So one of the, if you start to notice the fundamental principle associated with large size capitalism, which is maximizing shareholder value, taking as much money from as many different sources to funnel to the shareholders, whether they're management or stockholders or investors. I'll just leave it at that. Or investors. They're away from the neighborhood, and really, customer service is a cost. Customer service is an inconvenience. Customer service is not considered a value revenue generating proposition. So that's why you don't get any.
Of course, it's a flat cost, right? It's a liability. Yeah, right. And it's funny you say that, because when we first moved to Colorado 5 years ago, we live in a great town called Fort Collins. You know it. The first 6 months, I told my wife, I'm like, I don't want to shop at a restaurant that's a big box restaurant or a chain. I want to just go to all the local restaurants. I want to get to know the people that own these businesses. And we did it. In fact, we did it for almost a year. And it was amazing because you're meeting the owners. They take good care of you. They care about your experience. And then you go to the box spots, and we know them all, right? And you don't get any of that.
They're not,
because they're not vested in the success of that business.
Again, I've been on both sides of that coin. I've worked and owned small businesses and learned that people are your greatest asset. That people are, if you're a small business owner, and I know that sometimes it's really tough making payroll and making sure that all your costs are covered, and that your payroll is your biggest expense usually, and you're always aware of it. But if you're focused on paying only a minimum wage, so do you really want to have your team, your customer facing team, the people that you are counting on to represent you and your business, the people that you are counting on to increase your revenues, be minimum? Make the investment, but just don't give them the money. Provide incentives, provide the emotional commitment that identifies that you have purpose in them, that you have value in them. That'll get you better than any amount of minimum wage savings that you might try to squeeze out of your business. People will bend over backwards to help you if they believe that you are invested in them. I'm going to tell you a quick story, if you don't mind, Jimmy.
I love
I
that.
love finding
Yeah,
businesses that are doing
sure.
extraordinary things and highlighting them. There's a business it's called Hive of the Ozarks, and it started by a woman. Her name's Melissa Skaggs. All right. Melissa Skaggs was a high school administrator who did IEPs at the school and subsequently saw hundreds of kids each year that needed help. And I went through an IEP process with my youngest daughter, Amy.
Mm,
She needed help learning to read. And it's kind of scary because you need to prove to the school that your child needs additional resources, and the school needs to justify that your child is one of the special
wow.
ones or ones that have the need to get their limited resources. But once you get through that process, the
Mm,
school was absolutely fabulous. And Amy to this day is just a terrific reader. She went on to college
mm,
and has a great career today. Anyways,
mm,
Melissa saw that for kids with differing abilities that were a little bit more challenging, once school ended, they were on their own, and there wasn't a platform or a transition or a program to help them
mm,
integrate into society. And many families weren't really prepared for
mm.
that. And many businesses most certainly aren't prepared to, quote, take a risk on someone who is different, that needs some additional support. So Melissa opened this
Mm,
cafe called Hive of the Ozarks. 50% of the staff has differing needs. 50% has traditional skill
mm,
sets, and they work together. What's beautiful about this is that the whole town knows about
mm.
this cafe. It's not that their coffee is the best in the world. I'm sure it's
Yeah.
good, but you have to stand in line to get in the door. They have a wait list for people that want to work there.
Yeah.
Okay. It's because they have heart, and the
Yes.
whole town wants them to succeed.
Mm,
So I love asking business owners, do your employees in
mm, I
your
love
town
that.
want you to succeed? And if not, how can we get it so that they do?
Mm,
Because that's the secret to being essential in your community. And we
yes.
need to be essential.
I love that. It's such a great story because, I mean, for a lot of different reasons, right? It touches your heart because you know that people are helping people. But I think this speaks to the idea that small businesses truly do embody the American spirit. I mean, we don't talk about this anymore because everybody wants us to hate America, but we don't hate America. We love America. And if we're not working together to make it great, amazing, to make it fulfill its promise, then what are we doing, right? I'll tell you what, I love that. How do small businesses, that's a great example of them displaying the American spirit and integrating fully into their community. So everybody's rooting for them. So it's why on my phone, I have an app called Yelp. And that's why, all these local businesses really care about the ratings of their customers. And that's why they're very responsive to their customer. They go above and beyond to help them. But you go into a Target, you go into one of these big box retailers, they don't care about Yelp reviews at all.
No.
But the local businesses do. That's an important feature of small business and an advantage, as you would say, isn't it?
Very much so. As I had mentioned, the rehumanization of your business with your community, your employees, is
Mm,
a benefit to all, including yourself. This is the secret surprise that a lot of business owners come away with when they start to prioritize others. Not just
mm,
the money, but the people. I always say people are as important as profits. Now, and I'm going to
mm.
stop here and say, I believe in profits. I'm a
Yeah.
capitalist. I'm trained in finance and business. I got my MBA from Northwestern University. I've been on Wall Street for 20 years. I've had successful businesses. I've had failed businesses also. I
Mm,
know both sides of the of
yeah.
the of the coin in regards to how
Mm,
capitalism works. And it can work.
yeah.
When you start to invest in the people, one of the benefits is how it impacts you as a human, how it
Mm,
rehumanizes you in regards to your relationship with your family, with your partner,
yes.
with your God.
Yeah.
It all flows into place. So
Yeah.
I time and time again will say that small businesses are uniquely positioned because they can pivot.
Yeah.
They can make these decisions.
Yeah.
There's the store manager at your local Target. He might be the greatest guy in the world and want to be able to make adjustments to his store. He does not
Mm.
have that ability. But you
Yep.
do as a private small business owner. You can make those decisions. That's the
Yeah.
joy of being an entrepreneur. You were talking
Yes.
about how it is part of our nature, really part of our DNA as a culture, the entrepreneurial spirit. And
Hmm.
I think back to, gosh, when we were marching westward and and essentially populating this country. Towns would start, people would start businesses, people would serve each other, people would help
Yeah.
each other in those frontier situations. It was rugged, and the way you survived
Yes.
is by helping each other. Well, it's still rugged out there.
Mm.
It's not as wilderness like, but it's rugged in the
Yeah.
business world. And
Yeah.
I'm an advocate that small businesses, people in our communities, need to help each other for us to survive. Because
Yeah.
if you're waiting for the government to save you, if you're waiting for Apple or Google or ChatGPT to save you, um, you're in for a lonely existence. The only
Yeah.
people that are going to save you are those around you that feel and care and want you to succeed. It's because
Yes.
you want them to succeed too.
Mhm. Yeah. And it reminds me actually of one of the greatest series that was ever produced, Little House on the Prairie. And and while this is maybe simplistic, I think we'd be better off teaching that in schools than most of the nonsense we're teaching in our schools. But that's another show. The beauty of
A
it
long
was
one.
these are yeah, that's a long show. True. But the beauty of it was, you had all of these entrepreneurs, farmers, storekeepers, innkeepers, et cetera, et cetera. And when one person fell on hard times, the town rallied around that family because they cared about them. And that's the beauty of small business, right? I think small business can respond to the needs of the community. And part of the problem is the further you get away from the community and you get into these public companies like Target and like these other big box retailers, you lose the small town values. And those big box retailers are dependent upon money from banks who have requirements on their money. And they have agendas attached to that. Whereas local private business owners do not have big box agendas. So, you've seen Bud Light now is a punchline. Target is a punchline now because of the indoctrination of values that most small town Americans do not share. Local businesses have to be responsive to the values and the culture that they live in. And they don't have this luxury of blaming somebody else on the big box side. That's part of what I love about the local businesses is they're usually involved in little leagues and at the sports in the communities and the schools in a rich way. And I think we need to get back to that because then you're not at the whim of the latest political or narrative that people need us to tell people.
I have a very good friend. He owns a cyclery shop up in Deerfield, and his father started it. So it's a second generation. And he talks about this, that, the reason that he can stay in business, even though his products cost a little bit more, is that
Mm-hmm.
he's committed to the community. When
Yes.
someone from the school comes over and says, we need a bike for an auction to raise money for X, Y, or Z, he gives them a bike.
It's amazing.
The guys at Dick's, they can't.
Right.
They can't. And maybe the manager wants to, but it's just not policy. Because Dick's is focused on maximizing shareholder value. That's their mantra.
Yes.
So it's just their model. And the sooner that we as consumers recognize the importance and value of our economic might, okay,
Yes.
the more that we'll get the results that we want as a community. Okay. So I live in Chicago, and I think one of the first people to really understand the power of economic might was a famous Chicagoan. And I'm not going to talk about his politics. I'm going to talk about his policies, and that's Reverend Jesse Jackson. Okay.
Mm.
Reverend Jesse Jackson would say, we're going to have an economic boycott if you don't support affirmative action, or if you don't support the rights or invest in our community. Well, you might believe or say things one way or the other, but what I do know is that companies listened to him and saw that he had purchasing power. He had enough people in his community to have an impact on whether or not companies would change their behavior. Now, the good news is that I believe in a positive approach in regards to changing people's behavior or influencing or helping to guide. And that is by giving them opportunities to do good. To me, it's not so much boycotting people that I don't care about and getting angry about it, because I can get angry. And I've found in my life that, Jimmy, I'd much rather be happy. I'd much rather joyfully go and support the organizations that I can get behind. I'd much rather joyfully be an advocate for those that are doing right than to be angry and throwing stones at those that I perceive are doing wrong.
Yes. And it's one of the reasons why I've always maintained that one of the things we can do is put our money where our heart is.
You can put your money where your heart is. It matters.
Yeah.
It matters.
Yes. It does matter. And when I become aware that a company is actively, like some of these large companies are actively working against my values, my community, my culture, my beliefs, then I have an obligation to change my buying behavior. So, for example, I know that there are large companies that with names that everyone knows that is actively undermining the family and actively undermining parental influence in their own homes. Well, I'm not okay with that. So now when I find a product on their platform, I will find out who makes it, who sells it, and then I will reroute my purchase to the company that shares my values rather than using the big box alternative. And in that way, I feel empowered to put my money where my heart is and not to fund the companies that are actively working against my values and my faith.
And how hard is that to do, Jimmy? How much of an inconvenience is that to you? Does it really take a lot out of your life to reward the local businesses that are there supporting your community? Then, like I do the same. I'll go to a website that carries a lot of books, for instance, and identify the book that I want to buy. I forward a link to that book to my local bookstore, and I say, Jordan and Tim, I'm going to be by next week to pick up this book. Could you please buy this for me? And guess what? It was so simple, and I feel better. And guess what happens when I walk into their bookstore? They're happy to see me. They're joyous. And there's families in there that are there for book reading sessions. We have the ability to influence how our lives interact with the business community. Okay? We have economic power. Doesn't mean you have to be angry or vindictive, or it just means you need to be conscious.
Yes.
You just need to make conscious choices, because every dollar you spend goes somewhere. It goes somewhere. Where do you want it to go? Make a choice. Make it go to the place that does things that you love, that supports you, that supports your family, that supports your values. They're out there. In fact, they're the majority. You just really have to do a small amount of work. Because once you find them, it's automatic. It's super simple. It's like going to the local restaurant that is family owned. Every time you walk in there, they know your name, they know your table, they know your kids. Of course I want to go there.
Yes. And, it's funny. My wife and I just began a new project here at home. It's a renovation building project. And I had a friend of mine who's in that business come over and just kind of give me their ideas on what I should do. And then by the time we were done, I was like, hey, can you guys do this? Like, I was going to do it myself. And I'm like, but how much more joy would I get giving the business to someone who I know and love? I know his family. I know the company. And so we decided to do that. But that's that's the power of small business. And it's the relationships that you develop beyond just the large box experience.
So I'm going to tell another quick story about this. Small businesses, study after study after study says that the vast majority of their business comes from referrals, comes from relationships. So I find this so funny at times. Where do most people go to increase their client business, their new business relationships? Technology.
It's ridiculous.
I remember my father used to go and focus. 90% of his business was referrals. And I'm going to tell you a quick story about my father. When we were done, he owned a small paving company. And when we were done with every job that we did, my father would make a point for him and I to go meet with the customer in person at the end of the work. We'd go take a look at the work and he'd say, thank you for your business. If there's one piece of advice I'm going to give all small business owners that are out there, if you want to increase your business easily, immediately, just say thank you for your business. Systematically, make it part of who you are. First of all, they'll remember because so few people do it. Secondly, you'll feel great. I promise. It is a wonderful experience.
Yes.
So most people go and use new technology for getting new business. Okay.
That's something.
Even my dad back in the 60s, you know what his new technology was in the day? The yellow pages.
I was going to say the yellow pages. No one's going to know what that is. Nobody's going to know what the yellow pages are.
You know what his chatbot was? The answering machine. Somebody's talking, but nobody's there.
Oh my gosh. Oh, it's so good. It's so
90% of his business came from referrals, came from the people that he had breakfast with every morning at Doris's Diner, came from those customers that he made an effort that was a positive, reinforcing, good feeling effort to say thank you for your business.
Yep.
This is where, if you're a small business owner, make that small adjustment. I promise it'll feel good and your business will get better.
Yeah, no doubt. And I love that illustration. The best solutions are often the simplest solutions, aren't they?
They are. Tried and true.
Yeah. Yeah, tried and true. Well, we're heading into another season, it appears, of potential lockdowns, closings, etc. We're already seeing all of the talking heads in media talk about it. We're watching all of the same politicians. We're watching them parade the public health officials out. We've already been through this once, but it appears that they're laying the groundwork for another event. And there are plenty of businesses that I know, business owners that are like, we're not participating. Like, so we fell for the banana in the tailpipe once, but we're not falling for that again. We're not going for that again. What do you tell businesses? Because there's no small business that can weather another extended, protracted closing. What do you tell them? Like In-N-Out Burgers just came out and says, we're not going to let our employees wear a mask because you can't communicate with people and show them emotion and connection. What do you tell businesses, major businesses like them, who, by the way, become local, influencers? What do you tell them if another round is coming? What do you tell them to do?
So I'm always hesitant to encourage people to break the law. And I also understand the power of the state and the power of law enforcement and the heavy burden that the state can place on people. So I don't want to encourage people to jeopardize their lives, their families, or their reputations by doing things that will get them jailed, will get them sued, will get them damaged. So there's an old proverb that was actually created around 400 AD. 410 AD is when the barbarians raided Rome. It was the official fall of the Roman Empire. Western civilization had ended and the Dark Ages had started. And what occurred was that it was the Dark Ages, and there were literally marauding hordes of barbarians roaming the countryside, pillaging.
Wow.
The saying was, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Okay. I don't believe really in hope as much as live for the best. I think we should live fully, embrace all that we have available, but as they say, prepare for that rainy day. Okay. I don't know what the future is going to occur. I do know that there's a lot of uncertainty in the world, and that the best you can do is be prepared.
Yeah.
Be prepared. There is going to be changes. We are in a period of turbulent change. So be prepared, save, stock, have inventory. The likelihood of supply channels being disrupted again, I think, is very high. And vote. Okay.
Yeah.
Use the system or run. Be involved. I actually support 4 political candidates right now. 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans. And it's not that any of them are committed to win per se. They might, but I believe in their ability or their right or the importance of their voice in the discussion. If we just accept that we're going to have bad candidate A or candidate B without any participation in the process, I think that's a false choice. I think we need to be involved. There's rules to the game. Sometimes, particularly with small businesses, the rules are stacked against you. So if you feel like you're being at a disadvantage, you are. I'm sorry. It's just the fact. I'm a small business owner myself, and I feel the burden. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to give up. I just see it as this is my opportunity to leverage my specialness as a small business, my ability to connect, my ability to pivot, my ability to make decisions, my ability to be able to hear and understand the needs of my customer to my advantage. So use your strengths, participate in change that reflects your values and your belief in the decisions that need to be made.
Yeah, it's so good. And, I'm thankful for the group of businesses and churches, et cetera, that refused to allow. I don't believe the government should ever sit in a position where they can take your livelihood.
I don't either.
and destroy you economically. So I actually believe that's tyrannical. And I believe we have an obligation to consider standing against that. And that's why I'm so thankful for the churches that said, we're not closing. If you're going to keep the weed dispensaries open and the strip clubs open and the alcohol dispensaries open, then we're going to have church on Sunday. And I appreciate them. And because of them now, we still have religious freedom, because if somebody hadn't stood up, who knows what they would do the next time. The same is true for these small businesses. I'm thankful for the heroes that are willing to pay the price, because you said it well. You will pay a price. I think about the cake maker in Colorado. I think about the website 303 Creative that just went through their system all the way to the Supreme Court. And I think sometimes you're doing something for the benefit of others.
You just had a podcast with the coach who prayed at the 50-yard line.
Yes.
There are people that will take that moral stand. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't. Okay. I just want people to recognize that there will be a price to pay.
Yeah,
So
no doubt.
it's a balancing act, and one that I think I hear what you're saying, Jimmy. I think it's, we can't roll over to tyrannical government. We just can't because there, what occurs is there's no coming back. There's no coming back. But I also understand the cost that people pay, and I don't believe that I have the ability to say you should do that.
Right.
I think people need to make their own choices.
Yeah, and that's a big choice, right? Because they have a lot of considerations, the livelihood of their family. They've got the people that they employ. I mean, there's a lot of things to consider. And you will. The one thing I love, though, is the nonprofit legal associations like Alliance Defending Freedom, like First Liberty Institute, and on they go. There's so many now, and they're overwhelmed at representing small businesses whose rights have been infringed upon. They are overwhelmed, but they're doing it pro bono. They're doing it because of their donations of people. So we have relationships with people that are defending religious freedom, economic freedom, medical freedom. And I'm super thankful for them because it does make it possible for people to stand up for their values and pay that price, like you say.
The court system does work in this country. I know that people are trying to politicize the court system, but we have multiple levels of judicial appeals, and that's and generally our court system, I think, is true and is so valuable. I've been very fortunate in regard to being able to travel extensively around the world. And I think everyone should spend some time out of this country just so that they recognize how incredibly special and unique this country is.
I agree.
There are people that kill each other in certain areas because of their beliefs, literally beat each other to death because of their beliefs or skin color. There are places where if you make a statement, you go to jail without trial, without misrepresentation, without any ability for appeal. There are checks and balances in this country. It is not a perfect place. It has never been a perfect place.
That's right.
But there are millions of people that want to come here. It is so much better than any other place. And we have made so much progress over the decades, both in our health, both in our quality of life, both in civil rights. We have made tremendous progress. Are we perfect? Are we there yet? No. But we're human. And we're making progress. The particularly small businessmen and women, they care for their customers. They care for their community. These are some of the most well-balanced, loving people that I've ever met. It's one of the reasons that I feel so passionate and responsible for trying to help. These are good people.
Yes, they are. And what would you? So I'm active in engaging with our local business owners and operators because I think it's important that you get to know those folks. And that's kind of my personality, But as people want to start making decisions about putting their money where their heart is, how do you recommend that they go about getting to know the business owners and operators in their local businesses?
You walk in the door, the little bell rings above the door. You say, "Hi, I live right down the street or over here. I haven't had the chance to meet you or see your store. Tell me about it. Tell me about yourself." You just made a friend.
Yes. And you know what I find is when you have a relationship with someone, number one, you're more excited about giving them your business. But number two, you're very loyal to them as well. All of a sudden, I want to eat at this restaurant.
All the time. All the time.
Yeah.
And tell my friends about it.
Yeah. Which I think is even the bigger thing, right? Is now once you start telling people of the relationship you have, oh, that guy, oh, that gal, they're great. Oh, they're great. They're your neighbors. You should eat there. You should shop there. It's a perfect way to make small business run.
Biggest source of new business, referrals, relationships.
Well, what would you tell our audience at this stage? There's, as you said, we're in turbulent times. lots of changes. We believe that small business owners are the backbone of America. They are, they have their best position for relationships. How would you encourage people to, to act on their values in their local community with business?
Recognize that your wallet has value. Okay. Mm. Your purchasing power impacts how people behave, how companies behave. Large organizations, they make decisions strictly because they think they can make money based on those decisions. Okay. So I actually prefer not to bother with them because their values are so different than my own on so many different levels. I want to be able to go down the street and say, I go to that store, I go to that store, I go to that store. I know the owners there. It's really simple. Even I live in Chicago. I live in Lincoln Park area. It's a city. And guess what? The streets are lined with small businesses. Sure, there's change. There's chains. There's the big brands. Doesn't mean you have to go there.
Yep. Yeah, that's good. It's just such a good reminder, Chris, just to really pay attention to where you're spending your money and really to make relationships. Be conscious of your decisions. Think about it. And as you become aware of where you're spending your money, spend it more responsibly. Spend it based on the relationships that you have.
I believe that's the best way to get the type of results, the type of life, the type of community that you talk about all the time on your podcast.
Yeah. Well, listen, thank you so much. This is going to, I think, inspire our listeners to really care about where they put their money, really care about the relationships, the local relationships that they have with their small businesses. And I think we can see a resurgence in the value of those essential businesses as we start to revive our communities. Thanks for being on today, Chris. You're a blessing.
Such a pleasure, Jimmy. Thank you.
You bet.